Welcome to The State of Us.
Beyond mainstream cable news and party lines, with a millennial and a boomer, The State of Us pushes past the noise and uncovers all the issues that matter.
Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
President Joe Biden and a bipartisan group of senators have reached a broad infrastructure deal. Depending how you look at it, it's going to be $1.2 trillion in investments, or about $579 billion additional dollars on top of what the government was already planning to spend. So what's in it exactly? Well, we're going to look at three things today. First, as a standalone bill, right? Is this a good infrastructure package? Is it something that we should tell our representatives that we want them to support? Number two, why do many Democrats and President Joe Biden insist that it should only be passed in tandem with a $3 trillion additional plan for education, climate, healthcare, et cetera? And number three, we're going to talk about the long shot of actually getting it passed, right? Where you're going to say, well, but it has bipartisan support, right? Well, there's some hiccups there. And how would it actually work to pass this and then do the rest through reconciliation, all this other stuff the Democrats want? There's a lot to talk about. Very important. We've been hearing about for pretty much the entire time I've been alive, most of Lance's life. We got to do something on infrastructure, right? And for some reason, it continues to elude us. But here it is. Maybe we can get something done, and that's what we're going to look at today. But of course, we couldn't begin this conversation on infrastructure without
TrueChat senior historian and an educator of more than 30 years. Here is your friendly redneck liberal, Lance Jackson.
Well, and why should you care? I mean, hey, we have bipartisanship. That's why you should care. But then, do we really have bipartisanship? Which is also why you should care. So I think that is the crux of the issue here, is that it's introduced as bipartisanship. And then later on, the progressives in the Democratic Party say, yeah, well, we're not going to vote for this unless we get all the stuff that we want. And President Biden says, well, I'm not going to sign them unless I get both of them. And Mitch McConnell said, well, what happened to bipartisanship? So, I mean, I think that's why you should care, is because we have bipartisanship. But what kind of bipartisanship do we have, and what's going to get passed? But for everybody's favorite segment of the show, word of the day, we have the word inculcate. I-N-C-U-L-C-A-T-E, inculcate. 3 syllables. It can be a noun in a couple different variables, or it can also be a transitive verb. But it means to impress upon the mind by frequent repetition or persistent urging.
inculcate.
Inculcate.
Yes.
Yes.
Are we going to inculcate today? Is that?
Well, we can, or are the politicians trying to inculcate us by using the word bipartisanship over and over again to thinking it's bipartisanship when it's not?
So that brings us to the first piece here, right? Which is let's test the waters on this idea of, is it a good, what's been proposed, the infrastructure plan, right? It's important to note this is a plan. It's not even a bill yet, because it doesn't actually exist yet in the Senate or the House. So it's in the process of that. But as a plan, what's actually in it? You got these Republicans, you got these Democratic senators. They've come together and they've said, look, this is what we're willing to do. I think it's important to give a little credit, Lance, to the fact that this already happened in the House about a week ago. The Problem Solvers Caucus, which was set up and organized by No Labels, who's been on the show a number of times, they had already come. I think it was like 21 from each party, 21 congressmen from each party came together and said, here's what we would do. So not saying that this has anything to do with the fact that that happened a week ago, but interesting coincidence, the timing of all that. So glad that something is moving forward, if nonetheless, but let's look at what's actually in it. You've got $66 billion, Lance, in rail projects and $49 billion for public transit. So this big chunk of money here, right, over $100 billion, basically for Secretary Pete Buttigieg, right? So hand this to him and say, here you go. Go go do something here. And then we get a lot more, $109 billion in road and bridge projects, $201 billion in water, sewer, power, and environmental remediation projects. Getting away from Department of Transportation, you're bleeding into some other departments now, right? $65 billion for broadband infrastructure, and a $47 billion down payment on resilience projects to cope with climate change. Basically, that part, just to be clear, the agreement includes billions slated for weatherproofing, upgrades to coastal infrastructure, and projects intended to mitigate against severe weather. So it's very heavily focused on resilience, I guess, is a good word for it, right? It's really not as much about, let's build a lot of electric vehicles or install solar panels. It's about let's do the things that we're going to have to do to deal with a changing climate, to adapt to a changing climate more than to prevent or fix the changing climate, right? So,
well, like you said, is this, as you've gone through things, the question that you asked was, is this bill in and of itself good, bad, or great? And should we tell our representatives we want them to support it? Of course it's great. I mean, this is awesome. I understand that the progressives want more, and I myself think maybe there should be some more. But right definition of bipartisanship is, well, we have to give a little and get a little. As you've always said, with President Ronald Reagan, way back for you young people back in from 80 to 88, saying, okay, I'm going to ask for all of this, and if you'll give me 30%, I'll take the 30% because that's better than nothing. And then I'll ask for the remainder of it 2 years from now, and maybe I'll get another 20%. Well, I got half of what I wanted. Well, this is the way I see this. This is a good thing. We've got public transportation, the rail project, retooling bridges that are falling apart and roads that are falling apart. And the big one for me, as we just come out of the pandemic and everybody went online and Zoom sessions and whatever search engines you use, but $65 billion for broadband infrastructure. I mean, this is good stuff. This is stuff that we've been clamoring for for the last 3 or 4 years on this show, and that people on both sides of the aisle have said would help people, that would, obviously, well, why do we care about roads and bridges? I don't have any roads or bridges in my town. Okay, but that's how stuff gets to your Walmart. That's how stuff gets to your big box store. That's how Amazon Prime gets their stuff delivered to you. You need the roads and the bridges for commerce to continue. And my gosh, this internet thing we've been talking about it as the biggest, most important piece since the Tennessee Valley Authority brought electricity to the Appalachian Mountain region during the Great Depression back in the 1930s. So, I think there's a lot here to get really excited about. This in and of itself as a standalone bill, when it gets written, that it would actually get passed, I think is tremendous. Okay, would I like to see it paid for differently? Would I have, some things that I don't like about it? Sure. That's why it's bipartisan. Not everything in it do I like, or do I like the way it's going to be handled. But overall, it's got things in it that I can support, and I'm going to have to overlook some of the things that I don't like, because you don't get bipartisanship if you only get one side gets their way. That's not bipartisanship.
Because the alternative is that we don't do anything and we just keep going with the way we've been doing. So, but you mentioned paying for it, and we do want to talk about a couple things. What's not in it, right? And also how it's being paid for. So notably, there's no new taxes on the wealthier corporations. So gone is the rollback of President Donald J. Trump's tax cuts or Mr. Biden's plan to raise the rates paid by corporations, a core selling point, obviously, of the plan for progressives. We'll talk about that, though, when we talk about the reconciliation thing in the next segment, because it's not exactly gone. It's just gone from this particular piece of legislation.
But that's what I'm saying. Would I like to have done some of those things as well? Certainly. But if I can get broadband internet and I can get some money to create jobs, to improve the roads and the bridges in the country, that's a win. That's a win for the people of the United States. Okay, you don't like the way we're going to pay for it? I get that. I don't disagree with the people that would say, well, we need to do that. We need to take that next step. I don't disagree with that. But if we can get this part done, if we can get this part in, that's a huge step forward from where we've been over the last 10 years talking about it and not getting anything done.
I think the broadband thing is super notable to point out. $65 billion for broadband infrastructure, because you and I have talked about for a long time, if you want to fix some of the division in this country, one of the ways you do it is by decreasing the need for people to leave small communities to go to big communities to have access to the things that can build the type of life they want. This is one of those big obstacles, especially with the pandemic. We've talked about remote work. Remote work's only going to increase, especially as the types of jobs people do continue to be enabled for remote type work. And if we're not going to just squeeze our cities and create greater wealth and equity in cities by skyrocketing housing prices and literally pricing people out of their own neighborhoods, if we want to avoid that and we want to do something about the rural and urban divide and therefore the partisanship that plagues America with this continued, we did that piece on Ohio recently, right, as a template of the state where we're seeing areas flipping, but red areas getting redder, blue areas getting bluer. Some of them have switched altogether, but the divide is getting bigger and less bipartisan. This is one of the ways you address that, because you make it easier for people to live wherever they want to live instead of it being, well, I have to live here because it's where I have access to stuff. So I think the value of that cannot be overstated. If we want to stay on par with being the number one in the world, if we want to stay on par with China, and stay out in front of them, then we've got to invest in this. It's not a maybe kind of we have to at some point. It's we needed to do it 10 years ago. We got to do it now. It's essential.
It doesn't get rid of the income gap, but it's the first step towards closing the gap.
Yes, it doesn't eliminate the housing crisis,
right.
But
we're not going to sit here and tell you that, this is going to solve all the problems in the world. But it's a great first step towards getting those solutions to take place, to occur.
It has to happen in order to fix the problems. It is not the fix, but it will begin the process of making them better.
And Republicans and Democrats in a majority are both saying, yeah, this is a good idea.
Yep.
So there you go, people. We got it, right? Or do we? Do we really?
Do we? So how is this being paid for? We still have to look at that. And also notably, there's no major funding for housing in this, and Biden's big human infrastructure plan is gone, at least from this measure, which is what Lance was just hinting at. We still have to talk about it. It appears to be void of much of President's initial $2 trillion blueprint. And we'll talk about, where did that go? Because are Democrats really just giving up on it? Well, no, they're not. They think they're going to pass it on their own via reconciliation. What is it? How does it work? There's lots still to talk about. Keep it here on The State of Us. We'll be right back.
We are The State of Us. Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
A $1.2 trillion investment to rebuild the nation's infrastructure. I think notably it's important, though, to scare people a little less. Also maybe makes people not quite as excited. It's only $579 billion in new spending, right? Because the allocations that we're talking about, there's already money spent, right? It's not like we don't spend any money on infrastructure. We already spend some on infrastructure. So this is like, another $580 billion on top of what we were planning to spend over the same period. But how are we going to pay for that additional money, right? Well, basically the way that this plan lays it out is stepped up tax collection by the IRS. You might say, can we really pay for a big chunk of this by doing that? Well, the proposal is expected to include heightened enforcement efforts by the Internal Revenue Service to reduce tax evasion by corporations and high earners. One of the lawmakers who worked on the deal, Senator Mark Warner, Democrat of Virginia, said the package would pump around $40 billion into enforcement to produce a net gain in tax revenues of at least $100 billion. Some estimates have that closer to $150 billion. And that would be, of course, on a regular basis, not a one-time thing, because it's ongoing enforcement.
Doesn't that upset you more than the supposed voter fraud that everybody, that the conservatives have been upset
that there's
about?
$150 billion
There's $150 billion
uncollected
that
taxes.
rich people haven't been paying in taxes. They've been able to manipulate the system. That to me seems like a real problem whether or not voter fraud is a real problem has yet to be proven. I mean, it may be, and it may come out, but in the last 9 months, they haven't proven that there's any widespread voter fraud. There's nothing out there. There's no report that says that it's widespread, even though that's where state legislatures are attacking and doing. But everybody agrees that, yeah, well, corporations and rich people are owe about $150 billion more in taxes than they're paying. And you're not upset about that? I know I am. I mean, that seems like a real problem to me. And does that pay for all of the 500 and some odd change billion that you said? No, but wouldn't it be great to have people pay what they're supposed to pay? So, I mean, that seems like a good thing.
Common sense, maybe?
Well, yeah, but it seems like it's two good steps.
Yeah.
One, we're going to make you pay what you should pay, and it's going to give us some of the extra money that we need to do some of these things that both Republicans and Democrats agree need to be done.
It seems like one of those things that should have been there all along, because we can talk about, the merits of whether or not, for example, you should raise taxes like President Biden wants to on corporations, right? And your highest earning Americans. We can talk about that all we want, but it doesn't do a whole heck of a lot of good to raise taxes if we're not even collecting the taxes that we already, that there's already laws for. We already have in place. We're not collecting money we're supposed to be collecting. So we can raise it, but it makes sense. I mean, I've always thought, right, you want to make sure you're doing what you're supposed to do. And then if we want to build on that, we do that. So I think it shouldn't need to come as part of infrastructure. We should have just been doing it anyway, but I'm glad that it's getting done. And if it helps pay for this, I mean, I think, again, hopefully nobody would object to this. It's already the law, right? These are people that are not paying what they're supposed to pay. So why would anybody object to they should have to pay what legally under, the Republicans' tax agenda they're supposed to pay that they're not paying.
As the redneck liberal here, I am progressive, and I think there ought to be more taxes on the wealthy. I that's what I was hinting at in the first segment. I'm disappointed that part is not in there, but I understand that you wouldn't have gotten the Republicans to sign on to this if you had done that. And I think the positive aspects of the bridges and the roads and the broadband outweigh the negative loss of not hitting the wealthier a little bit harder, rolling back the Trump tax cuts. Now, my AOC progressive friends would disagree with me.
Sure.
The Bernie bros out there that I talk to, they disagree with me and they say, if you can't get it all, then it's not worth anything. I just have to respectfully disagree with them, just like I respectfully disagree with the arch conservatives led by Jim Jordan and Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley's who stand up there and say, it's got to be this way or nothing. I don't agree with them either. I don't agree that, we just throw it all out because we can't get everything we want. I just don't see that as the right direction to move. I understand their argument. I respectfully disagree with it on both sides. Well,
let's talk a little bit too about if the Democrats have really come forward with a bipartisan deal, because this is from, by the way, articles linked at thestateofus.org. Send us your thoughts, by the way. What do you think about everything that's in it? Is it a good bill? I think Lance and I's consensus answer is yes. Yes. You should call your representatives, tell them to vote yes. Because we got to pass this. We got to do something about infrastructure. This is decent, right? It's not everything that everybody hopes for, but it's a good plan. Tell your representative to vote yes. But let's talk about...
The biggest reason it's a good plan is that the majority of Republicans and Democrats both agree on it.
Yeah.
That tells you right there it's a good plan.
And I don't think there's anything in here you can say we should not do that thing. Right? Maybe not in the amount, maybe not exactly this way, but none of these things are, we'll just do nothing about that, right? No. So here's the deal, though. These articles, which are at thestateofus.org, and send us an email, podcast@thestateofus.org. But almost immediately after reaching the breakthrough, Mr. Biden and the Democrats offered a giant caveat that could complicate its chances of passage. Both the president and top Democrats said the compromise, which constitutes only a small fraction of the expansive $4 trillion economic agenda Mr. Biden has proposed, could advance only together with a far larger bill that would pour trillions more into healthcare, childcare, higher education access, and climate change programs. That measure, vehemently opposed by Republicans, would be paid for by remaking the tax code to capture the wealth of the super rich and multinational corporations that shift profits and jobs overseas. Quote, "If this is the only thing that comes to me, I'm not signing it," end quote, Mr. Biden said of the infrastructure piece. Quote, "It's in tandem," end quote. And the friendly redneck liberal, for folks that didn't see it there, he just threw the article in the air, hands up, and there it is, folks. There's the bipartisanship, except wait, not. Because
it's not, because now we're going to hold you hostage. You've said you'll vote for this, but if you don't vote for the other pieces that you don't like, I'm not going to pass this stuff that you do like. I won't sign it into law. Now, I hope, okay, but I'm assuming here, and I don't like to assume, that President Biden is using this as a negotiation ploy, that there will be enough Republicans out there who get a hold of their senators and say, this has got some good stuff in it. You need to work on getting the other part of the other one. I hope that's the ploy. I will be very disappointed in President Biden. I will be very upset with President Biden if he doesn't do this. But here's the problem, right? The article goes on later and it says the AOC, Bernie Sanders wing of the Democratic Party says, yeah, well, we're not voting for this first part unless we get our second part. So the bipartisanship goes out the window, not just because the Republicans won't support the extra $4 trillion on the human side of the infrastructure bill that this doesn't address, but the Democrats say we're not going to do broadband or bridges and roads if we don't get the human side. Come on, people. Now we're right back to square one. You're upset that the Republicans won't support the human side, but you're not going to support the physical side if you don't get the human side. You're no better than they are. Here's a chance for you as the liberal wing of the Democratic Party to take the high road and say, hey, we want more. We're willing to work more for you. But the Republicans are saying no. So we're going to at least give you broadband internet and safe roads to drive on. But you don't throw out something good because you didn't get everything you want. You use that in the upcoming campaign to say, this is why you need to reelect us, because we were willing to get this part for you, and we will continue to work and strive to get the human side of this bill passed in the next Congress if you reelect us. I'm sorry.
Well, they can do that, Lance, right?
Because that's just frustration. I mean, it just seems like dumb politics.
It's more effective to getting reelected. And I hate that it always comes back to that freaking topic of it's easier for AOC, Bernie Sanders, Ted Cruz, and Jim Jordan, those four people, right? It is easier to get elected by saying, look, you can see the clips. I said we needed to do all these things and they wouldn't do it, you know? And what they leave out, of course, is that they blocked getting some of those things done because they said we have to have it all, by God.
Whose fault is that? Whose fault is it that they get to do that and get reelected?
Well, we, of course, allow it, the voters.
Exactly. That's my point. Listen, people, okay? Listen, we have the right to vote. I'm not talking about, getting physical and all that kind of stuff. When I'm talking about we get what we vote for, okay? I'm not saying that we have an overthrow of the government, but we do it through nonviolent means by voting, okay? We're getting these kinds of politicians, and I don't disagree with what Justin just said, that it benefits those four people, and you had two from the right and two from the left, but it only benefits them because we allow it to benefit them. We end up re-electing them instead of electing people who will go there to work to get things done for us. So you get what you vote for, okay? And so we've got those four people who are diametrically opposed doing the same thing because that's what we elected. So we need to vote for people who will find some common ground and give us something that will work to improve the lives and the stability of the United States of America and the people that live in it.
Because it only benefits them. That's the whole thing of it, right?
We allow it.
Them taking the hard line, though, doesn't do anything for us, because it leaves what may very well happen now is it will leave a good bipartisan framework. It'll leave it on the table and we won't get it passed because, we couldn't have everything we wanted. Okay. So, right. It's just, so we didn't do anything. We could have done something, and instead we did nothing. Who did that help? It didn't help the American people. It gave you something clear and easy to run on. That's what it did. So why is the reconciliation process happening? Well, we just gave you a taste of it, but how would it actually work? Is there a chance that this might actually go through? Or is it all just more blustering? Well, there's more to talk about. Keep it here on The State of Us. We'll be right back.
We are The State of Us. Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
A bipartisan infrastructure plan has been reached. But whoa, big caveat. We got another $4 trillion that we're after here, and we're going to do it without you through a process called reconciliation. And by the way, we're not going to move forward with this bipartisan bill if we don't simultaneously move forward with this other package through reconciliation. So what does all that mean? Because if you're like me and you're out there and you hear this, it's like, what? Wait a minute. What does that mean? So what it means, right, is that, well, we got this thing that we could agree on to do the traditional way, right, which is we need to pass a 60 vote threshold to put it on the floor of the Senate. And I know this seems, I understand how to some people this would seem really stupid. We need, right, 60 senators to say, we're going to put it on the floor of the Senate to consider it for passage. Doesn't mean 60 senators have to think that it's a good idea. It means that they have to say we're willing to put it up for a vote. And then we can vote and pass it with just 51 votes, right? So I am perfectly aware of the tomfoolery that sounds like. So you're telling me that we got to have 60 that say we're going to vote on it, but then we can pass it with just 51. So don't we really just need 60? Yeah, basically, that's called the filibuster, right? Which is that thing that you hear about that prevents so much from moving through the Senate without bipartisan support. Well, there's a handy-dandy way around that called reconciliation. And reconciliation, and you correct me if I'm wrong, Lance, but from a historical standpoint, the thinking here, right, the purpose of reconciliation is we have to pass this budget every year. Right. And we pass the budget and then we realize, oh, crap, there's things that we didn't get this or that in there, or we need to move some money from this area to that area. We don't have a lot of time to screw around with this. Right. We need to do something and get it done. Well, guess what? The process of reconciliation, it allows us to do that with just a simple majority because generally speaking, it's not considered per se new laws, right? It's more of, well, this is a law that amends existing laws. So really, it makes sense why we would have reconciliation, right? I mean, that's basic. Sometimes we have to change things in the middle of the year. What doesn't make sense is that, as we talked about before when we first talked about the package, it's really not designed. It was not meant to be used in this kind of manner. Doesn't mean that it can't be, but it does mean that that's not really why it was originally conceived.
But both sides have used it to their advantage to pass things they want when they don't have 60 votes and to stay away from the filibuster.
Which to me brings up the whole question of why not just...
So both sides have used it. And at different times, both sides have been against it because they didn't like it when it was used against them. So there you have it. That's what we have. We passed a law to help expedite things, to speed things up when it comes to the budget. But then some quick thinking lawyer type in Congress said, hey, we could also use it to do this and get something passed that we don't have the votes for. And now both sides have used it for that way. And so now it's just part of the game that we play.
Which is, to me, this is one of those times where, okay, we need to fix this because we need to do one of two things in my mind, right? We either have to say, we got to get rid of the filibuster because this is stupid. We have reconciliation, which they just use to go around it whenever they can. Granted, it can't be used for everything. I mean, we saw an example just recently, right? The Democrats wanted to pass something. They thought about reconciliation. They couldn't do it because the parliamentarians said, nah, this doesn't really fit, folks. You know, I mean, it's a stretch most of the time, but it's a big stretch. It can only be used
when it comes to the budget. As per your explanation, it's a budget resolution issue.
You have to justify that it's like
something in the budget.
Revision of the budget somehow, right? So you might say, well, how did tax cuts go in there? Well, tax cuts or tax increases, right, would be part of the greater process of what's going to come in versus what's going to go out. In my mind, we've got this issue, right, where you either have to tighten, the two options are you either tighten reconciliation so that it's really ratcheted down so that this nonsense quits happening where, we're going to, we can't get past the filibuster, so we're going to do it this way because technically we can. Either ratchet that down and secure it, or you just do away with the filibuster and say, you just got to have a majority because that's on most things. You just got to have a majority because that's just how popular government works, which there's arguments for and against. It's a different show, but I'm just saying, I think we all need to not set aside the fact that we should do something about this because it's stupid the way that it is right now, because it puts these things forward where, well, we can do these things, but we can't do these things without a majority. And we do it over here through reconciliation. And like Lance said, we get this back and forth that's just nonsensical because they both use it to answer the question of, has this ever been used? Yes, many times. Both parties have used it. Both parties have railed against it. So clearly it's something that needs adjusted because it's obviously something that we have issues with as a country. When it's used against us, we don't like it. When it's used for us, we're okay with it. And it's all just buffoonery anyway, when we could probably figure out a better way to go about it.
But are we really going to, ever get there? Because, we're reading a book that we're going to review on the show in the next couple of weeks that talks about this going on 130 years ago. So the particulars may have changed, but the way the discussion and the fighting goes is very similar. And so I don't know how you're going to get to what you've proposed because it's logical and makes sense. So I guess if you have an answer on how it's going to happen, I don't think it's going to happen. So the bigger question to me then is this the right way to go? Are the Democrats going to shoot themselves in the foot here? Are they going to threaten reconciliation for the human side of the infrastructure bill and end up losing the bipartisan support for the physical part? And that's the way, that's my breaking it up, okay? When I say physical part versus the human part, I've referred to it 3 or 4 different times on the show today. But basically, bridges, roads, broadband, internet, physical, the human side, childcare, community college, healthcare. I just have a real hard time when doggone it, wouldn't it be nice just to do something for the people for a change instead of worrying about doing something for yourself, i.e. your political career? I mean, wouldn't you like to go back to your constituents and say, look what I did for you people? Wouldn't it be nice to say that would enhance one's political career if you could go back to the voters and say, look what I did for you?
And it might not hurt too to signal to the world.
Not what did I stop? How did I protect? Don't tell me how you protected me. Don't tell me what you stopped from happening to me.
What did you do?
What did you do? What did you do to make my life better? To make my child's life better? To make the future of my child better? What did you do for that? How did you help my grandparents? How did you help my parents out?
What did you do to create progress instead of instead of obstructing?
Yeah. I don't want to hear what you stopped. I want to hear what you did to make it better. Don't tell me what you stopped from harming me. Tell me what you did to make my life better, or to make my future better, or the future of my children better. I'm raging against the machine
for the last 35 years, right? Something like that.
Something like that.
No, I mean, hopefully folks know that's where we're at. It comes back to, yes, we think it should be passed. No, we don't like exactly everything that's in it. I think we both agree that the Democrats have made a strategic mistake here. Even if just from a purely strategy standpoint, right? Why? Why would you do this? Why not pass? Why not pass what you have agreement on? And then if you want to come back and slap the Republicans in the face with reconciliation, then do it. But you don't show them your hand right now and tell them that it's all going to be contingent, because you're literally giving the Ted Cruzes of the world, right, the perfect thing to say, whoa, crap, we're not going to vote for it now, because now they don't have to talk about the merits of the infrastructure bill. They get to talk about, well, the merits of that really don't matter when you're talking about spending $4 trillion over here that we're not going to be able to pay for without raising all these taxes and making everybody poor, right? I mean, it's like, boom, boom, we just wrote their talking points for them.
Why would you play poker with your whole card showing?
Oh, that's classic, classic stupid Democrats though, right? That's what we do is, the Democrats are all together when they're not in power, but by God, the moment they get power, they become stupid again. And here we are, no strategy. So,
you get something good. And I even told them what they could do with it, right?
Yeah.
You did something good.
Yep.
Make that your campaign in 2022.
Well, you were maybe going to do something good.
Well, yeah, you could.
Because now you might not get any of it. That's the whole.
Well, that's the scary. But you know what? That's the scary part.
Yeah.
And I guess I can't get all excited about what might happen, because now I'm wondering, will anything happen?
We've proven that we can come to an agreement on the basics of infrastructure, which we've been talking about for years. It's encouraging to see that we've proven we can come to a bipartisan framework. It will be incredibly discouraging if we don't pass it because of some asinine behavior by different people because of politics, right? So I think it's all the more important now that we've proven the frameworks here that it get passed, because we need to demonstrate not just to the world, but I think to ourselves and to our country that on a big issue like infrastructure, that we can still get something done, by God, without getting bogged down in the minutia of politics and everybody crying in their corner because they didn't get exactly what they wanted, because that's not what they're there for. I hate to break it to you, but that's not what they're supposed to be there for. So, Lance, people can let us know what they think, right? Send us an email, podcast@thestateofus.org. We love hearing from you. We heard from folks, on all kinds of different things, including infrastructure. And I think the consensus is most people would like to see something happen. But we want you to be part of this conversation, because that's what we're all about here, right?
That is correct. We here at True Chat have a mission, and that is to educate people by providing honest, open, and respectful conversations. And hopefully you've listened to today's program and it started a conversation maybe in your own brain with yourself, and it will carry over into your coworkers and your family members, and share it with them. And when they say, where are you getting these ideas? Good, bad, or indifferent? Where are you getting them? Say, well, it's this show, and you can find them on Spotify, Overcast, Stitcher, Apple Podcast, and everywhere podcasts are found.
The State of Us is released as a podcast on Tuesdays and Thursdays by 4 a.m. Eastern Time. We're also a radio program heard across the country on AM and FM stations. So check your local talk stations, see if they carry us. And if they don't, call them up and tell them they should. For The State of Us on True Chat in Urbana, Ohio, I'm Justin T. Weller.
I'm Lance Jackson.
Special thanks to our producer, Bradley Butch, and a shout out to Senator from Ohio that was part of leading these bipartisan negotiations, right? So State of Ohio getting a little credit there for something. And thank you all, our listeners, for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Be the change. Be sure to check out our website, thestateofus.org, for books, articles, and all the ways to tune in. thestateofus.org.